However, the Scots readily took up the slack and spilled over into areas designated for English settlement. Thus, the Scottish influence in the plantation was much greater than was ever intended. And we'll take some examples. For example, the city and county of Londonderry, East Donegal, West Tyrone and the Clocker Valley. All these were earmarked for English settlement, but are extremely Scottish in character. In the early 17th century, Londonderry was predominantly English rather than Scottish, with few Presbyterians and mostly English surnames. However, attempts by the London companies to levy or to press people from London to be planted in Londonderry and Coleraine were not conspicuously successful, as I suggested. So much so that by the 1630s, the Scots were dominant in the city of Londonderry. According to a customs report in 1637, the English were weak and few in numbers, the Scots being many in number and 20 to 1 for the English. If you were to look at the barony of Clocker, which was allocated to the English undertakers, South Tyrone became more Scottish than English in settlement. In 1871, Presbyterians accounted for over 50% of the Protestant population of the Clocker Valley, and they invariably occupied the best farms. Three factors account for the strongly Scottish character of the plantation. First, the fact that Ulster is separated from Scotland by the narrow North Channel, which at one point is only about 12 miles wide, meant that the Scots could easily transport men and livestock to Ulster. Geographical proximity also meant that the plantation could be constantly reinforced with new Scottish settlers. Secondly, as James fully appreciated, impoverished but adventurous Scots could not resist the prospect of good land on agreeable terms. Thirdly, the Scots came from what I call a more primitive society than the English, and they could more readily adapt to conditions not radically different from those with which they were familiar in Scotland. In modern Ulster, the Scots presence is most strongly evident in County Antrim, North Down, the Irish Peninsula, the fishing villages of the Kingdom of Mourne, parts of County Londonderry and County Tyrone and East Donegal. And if you're looking for evidence, what tells you that an area has an Ulster Scots flavour? Well, you're looking for three things. You're looking for a strong Presbyterian tradition, you're looking for evidence of Ulster Scots speech, and you're looking for evidence of Scottish surnames. What about the native Irish? The Gaelic bards, the spin doctors of the old Gaelic order, lamented the flight of the Earls. As one of them said, "Woe to the heart that meditated, woe to the mind that conceived, woe to the council that decided on the project of setting out on this voyage, without knowing whether they should ever return to their native principality or patrimonies, and go to the end of the world." Now, contrary to the popular perception, in the Catholics of Ulster, Marianne Elliott has observed, the churls, the under-tenants who actually worked the land, may well have fared a good deal better under the new dispensation than under the old Gaelic land system. But the elite did not, and it is their voice we hear. It's also worth pointing out that some Gaelic families, the principal rivals of the Earls who fled, did extremely well out of the plantation settlement. And it's also worth pointing out as well that the Plantation of Ulster was implemented with considerable cooperation from the Ulster Irish. Furthermore, there's very little contemporary evidence of resentment towards the settlers. And again, Pinner's survey investigating the extent of the fortifications that have been provided, it would seem to me, or to men and indeed to others, that the fact that the settlers did not build their fortifications perhaps is an indication that they did not feel themselves to be under threat. However, it could be a case of people simply seeking to evade their responsibilities. So if we move on to 1633, it has been estimated that there were between 40 and 50,000 British settlers in Ulster, of whom 13,000 were adult males capable of bearing arms. By then, the settlers were arriving on their own initiative, rather than be brought over from the Undertaker's home region. We have figures for the British population of 7 of the 9 Ulster counties. Unfortunately, the figures for Cavan and Tyrone are unavailable. The British percentage of the population of the 7 counties that we do have figures for is as follows. 45% of the population of County Antrim was British, 35% of the population of County Armagh, 28% of the population of County Donegal, 43% of the population of County Down, 25% of the population of Fermanagh, and 45% of the population of County Londonderry. So there is a significant improvement there. And 11% of the population of County Monaghan were British. It's important not to view the Plantation of Ulster entirely in isolation and to recognise that there were other plantations. There had been earlier plantations in Kings and Queen's County, which I believe these days are referred to as Laois and Offaly, in 1556, and there had also been a plantation in Munster in 1586, and there were also plantations in Leitrim, Longford and Wexford, contemporaneous, at exactly the same time as the Plantation of Ulster. It's also worth noting that the Ulster plantation was contemporaneous with the Plantation of Virginia, the Jamestown settlement being established in 1607. Hence, Chichester's celebrated promotional spiel, quote, "I had rather labour with my hands in the Plantation of Ulster than dance in that of Virginia." The Plantation of Ulster proved to be the most significant and successful plantation in Irish history. Philip Robinson, in his book, The Plantation of Ulster, has succinctly described its wide-ranging impact. And I'll just summarise this. First of all, there was a radical transformation of the lowland landscape. There was the spread of a market-based rural economy, a quite spectacular growth in urbanisation, permanent dwellings of a more sophisticated construction, the spread of hedged enclosure, and significant innovation in agricultural methods, tools, livestock, and the systems of land tenure. And he also notes that in less tangible form, the new settlers brought with them a new language. These days he probably would say new languages, new surnames, new religion, and of course a change in political historical allegiance. In the second half of the 17th century, there were many further waves of settlement in Ulster. In Scotland, many people of a Covenanting background, especially from southwest Scotland, fled government persecution to the milder conditions of Ulster. It has been calculated that the Scottish population of Ulster rose from 20,000 in 1630 to nearly 70,000 by the late 1660s. In the last decade of the 17th century, many Scots came to Ulster to escape famine and difficult economic circumstances.